Okay. So, my name is Karen Zimmerman, and I want to welcome you back from that wonderful break and take a minute to introduce Kory Grushka. Kory is with Works Design Group, a boutique design and branding agency, and he's got tons of experience working with large multinational brands and personally directed creative designs for and visualization projects for clients such as PepsiCo, Hershey's, and Yale Center for Consumer Insights, but also has pharma experience. And his topic today is that he's going to provide a high-level overview of relevant topics having to do with data visualization and presentation design. And he's going to leave you with actionable thoughts that can improve your design and presentation work on a day-to-day basis. And if he doesn't, I wouldn't sue him because he's been a corporate lawyer.
Thanks. All right, so you guys are going to get like a personal session on branding, no, on data visualization. I actually don't have pharma experience. I've been doing this for 2.5 years, doing a lot of work with CPG clients, with their consumer insights teams at Pepsi, Hershey's, Yale also. And I think I can introduce a few interesting concepts for you that maybe you could take away, more centered on design rather than healthcare, but you guys judge for yourself. So I'm really going to be talking about 3 points: design, data visualization, and presentation design. Some of these ideas you're intuitively familiar with. Some of these you may be directly familiar with, but there's a good chance you don't know a number of them. Again, I am a former designer, artist. Then I was a corporate lawyer for 7 years, full-time. And now I'm a part-time lawyer doing consulting and also a partner with a local branding agency. The first general topic, design. I'll talk about 3 specific items, touch very high level on each one: typography, color, and simplicity in design. The first is the difference between a serif and a sans serif font. You guys have no doubt heard the word serif or sans serif, but you may not exactly know what they are or why they're relevant. Serif font is like Times New Roman. It's basically a font where the ends have those lines jutting out in the bottom and on the sides. Serif fonts are more conservative. They're more appropriate for print for a variety of reasons. If you're writing in paragraphs, serif fonts are very effective. Sans serif fonts are exactly the opposite. Very similar though. I mean, they just, on the ends, they don't have those lines jutting out. Sans serif fonts are much better to read on a screen. They're much better if you're using a limited number of words. And as a general matter, I may repeat this, but I would recommend, if you're not a designer and you're designing presentations, really just sticking to sans serif fonts. Kory, Arial, Helvetica. This presentation was done 100% in PowerPoint, 100% with one font, which is Helvetica. Briefly, some thoughts on color. This is a color wheel. You've all seen it. On the left side of the color wheel are cool colors. On the right side are warm colors. As a general rule of thumb, warm colors appear larger, equal weighting, equal prominence. You'll want to use warm colors like orange or yellow or red, to call out data points, to call out items that are of relevance when there are a lot of other data points in the mix. This is a more nuanced kind of view, but it's, the blues are all of the same prominence for the most part, and red will stand out. Another point on color. You should never use it just for decoration if you're not a designer, in my opinion. You should use it for a purpose. You should use it to achieve a specific goal, a specific communication goal, and you should limit the use of color. Otherwise, it creates distraction, it breaks hierarchy, it kind of, if you don't have great control over design, it's really just hard to deal with. If you have data points within a specific data set, similar data points, use a single color. Don't use a rainbow of colors in a chart if it's generally the same sort of data. Even if you're going to stick to one color and different shades of colors, it can be a great way to differentiate between, to group items, differentiate between items. And I just would, if you take anything out of this, limit the scope of the colors that you use in presentations or in charts or in visualizations. Not sure, yeah, I guess you could see it. This is 9 slides out of a presentation that I did on Club Store branding for the Club Store channel for CPG companies. Black and white, but really just limited to 3 colors. And I'll talk a little more about how to create kind of a consistent, cohesive narrative with the presentation. But in this instance, it's really just black, 3 colors on black. And if you really adhere very closely to a Spartan color palette, it's going to do wonders for you, even if nothing else. Last thing, simplicity. Design, in the design world and in life in general, simplicity seems to have become something of a paradigm, particularly in design, user interface design, and so forth. Steve Jobs introduced it in the modern age. The internet is all flat, simple design. Logo design is becoming all flat, simple design. Information design is becoming narrower and narrower. Everyone's trying to delete, edit out unnecessary data. The flat design movement probably was a Steve Jobs thing, at least in the modern era, with user interface. But it's been around for 30 years, 50 years. Dieter Rams was one of the key designers in the 20th century. He was the guy behind Braun, of the whole product portfolio from an industrial design perspective. He was very, very strict adherent to the idea of simplifying. And it's present everywhere, in fine art, architecture, Japanese architecture that's hundreds of years old, thousands maybe, and as well as even with documentation and data, the plain language movement is a movement that's more than 50 years old now, where the SEC and the IRS and various regulatory agencies, FDA, at least make attempts to simplify their forms, simplify their documentation, simplify their legal structures. And so I think all these concepts are relevant because simplifying and flattening and minimalist design is a trend it's not even a trend anymore. It seems like it's here to stay, at least for the next decade or more. Data visualization is the second point. The phrase information design is on a kind of a 50,000-foot level is a term that's kind of an umbrella term that encompasses dashboard design, UX design, medical diagrams, wayfinding, street signs, infographics, data visualizations, and a variety of others. For these purposes, I'll talk specifically about infographics and data visualizations. Now, infographics are basically design-heavy, data-light from my perspective. These are a couple of examples we did for a food and beverage CPG client. As opposed to data visualizations, which are data-heavy, graphic design light, more or less. Data visualizations are not done by a designer by hand. Data visualizations like this, anyway, they're done by a designer kind of curating the data and a plug-in to the standard design software to just throw in an Excel spreadsheet, tinker with the code, with the programming, and spit out designs like that, and then tweak as you go. From my perspective, there are 3 ways to evaluate infographics, data visualizations, information design. One is it clear? Is it accurate? Is there a logical layout, an appropriate layout for the audience? Is it simple with a clearly defined hierarchy? 2, is it insightful? Is the message appropriate for the audience? Does it add value with unique or new perspectives or insights? And lastly, is it beautiful? Is it visually engaging, uncluttered, are there complementary colors and fonts and layouts and so forth? And now, the focus of each of these three metrics will vary by the intended use. So in the marketing or editorial space, when you talk about infographics, it's more relevant to be insightful, targeted to your audience, and beautiful. Whereas in the research space, at least from my perspective, more important to be clear and accurate and insightful. The beauty part tends to fall by the wayside at times. That's our job. I was going to go through a variety of charting styles and kind of give you best practices and all of them, but I'll just stick to three given the time. So bar graphs are the most versatile, the best, and the most common by far charting template. They're great for comparing multiple data points, changes over time. I would, again, going back to the color discussion, limit your bar graphs if you can. All rules are made to be broken, but try to limit it to one color or shades of one color. The bars in a bar graph, the rule of thumb in the data visualization and the design industry is it should be half the size of an individual bar. I would say half to a full bar, basically. Once you go larger than that, you get little bars that are, just standing in awkward positions. Another best practice, don't ever have 45-degree angle type or type that reads bottom to top or top to bottom. I would instead just flip it if you can. Obviously, all rules are made to be broken. Flip it, always kind of read logically from left to right. Line graphs, great for time series relationships, great to show volatility. Ideally, use one line and use multiple line graphs to show something if there are a ton of lines. I wouldn't use more than 4, maybe 5 at the most. Legends, also not ideal for line graphs. Only use them generally when space is tight and you have a lot of intersecting lines. If you can in any way, just put the identification for each line beside them on the right side. And then finally, pie charts. The chart on the left, a donut chart, useful. It's really just a pie chart, useful for putting the total in the middle or above or so forth. A chart on the right obviously has way too many slices. You want to list, the best practice to start from 12 o'clock and go clockwise in terms of the largest slices. You also want to limit it to no more than 6. One technique for doing that, combining and calling out a separate chart, not a pie chart, beside it to identify the specifics. And then lastly, presentation design. We've been doing a lot more and more presentations, not in the pharma industry, but a lot of heavy data, consumer insights presentations. And I come from an animation background. My specialty was computer animation and graphic design. So to me, storytelling is the key to convincing people, the key to really portraying data in a way that's digestible and generates aha moments. And I think definitely for sure in presentation design, one famous artist whose work and his style nicely parallels presentation design is Alfred Hitchcock. He introduced the idea of what he called pure cinema, which was basically that visuals rather than dialogue should be the focus of a piece to convey emotional impact. He attributed a heightened significance to rhythm, editing, visual composition, and those are all points that some of which I'll cover, but generally, less data, less words, more visuals, simpler charts. Know your audience, the traditional kind of reporter diligence work. Who's your audience? Are they marketers? Are they research folks? Are they highly technical? Or are they senior management? In which case, the composition of the data needs to vary dramatically. I see when you have sophisticated data presentations, research folks are horrible at that. No offense. But they're horrible. You guys sometimes are horrible at funneling your data down to really key insights and really one per slide, which I'll talk about. Are you presenting in a large conference room? Is the presentation going to be available after the fact? Is it primarily intended to be available after the fact and you're doing a small presentation to a small group of people? Obviously more narrative if it's going to be available after and intended to be digested, not with a live audience. A couple thoughts on techniques for creating presentations. Obviously outlines, when I was still, as a lawyer, outlines were my life, checklists were my life. But as an animator, storyboards were very important, given that presentations are visual in their nature, they're a linear form of communication. I would not hesitate to try out storyboarding. It doesn't have to look like that. It could be stick figures. And, and again, even if it's just starting to do, like, let's say you want to experiment with something in the beginning of your presentation, or, some key data points in the middle of your presentation, or how do you close it, just Google storyboard template, print it out, and copy it, and just use it as kind of a sketch pad for yourself. Because again, it's all about sequence, all about rhythm, all about how you edit your story and how you tell it in that way. Simplify, again, back to minimalism, limit any non-essential, and ask yourself, I look at a specific slide, what information is superfluous? What information is not adding to my point? Limit the amount of text. What can you take away without hurting the meaning of the intended slide? And add more slides if you need to. If you have a chart that is really complex and you have 20 different points, turn it into 10 slides. One idea per slide. One tool for taking a lot of information and narrowing it to multiple slides is called layering. So let's say you have a chart, really complicated. You have 5 insights you want to cover. Instead of showing the chart and talking for 5 minutes, you can use a technique called layering. You're in PowerPoint. Just copy and paste this chart over 5 consecutive slides, and just superimpose stuff over it. And this was all done in PowerPoint from me anyway. Second to last point, wrapping up. Slides shouldn't talk. This is an atrocious slide. You should be talking, not your slides. Don't use paragraphs. Don't use many bullets. Limit, don't use multiple lines even if you can. Don't make it a narrative. Make it kind of like writing titles for a research paper. And then 5 things to remember. Simpler is always better. The minimalist movement in user interface design and in life is not changing anytime soon. Stick with it, particularly with data and presentations. Stick with sans serif fonts. It's a simple idea, but trust me, if you do it and that becomes your practice going forward, your presentations will be more effective, unless you're writing in research papers. It's all about storytelling. Try storyboarding, outlining. If you like it, great. If you don't, limit it to 1 idea per slide, and then use color with a purpose. You have a presentation, you have a data visualization, 2, 3 colors max. If you need to, to group items and show visually how they're grouped, use different shades of 1 color. That's all I got.
So our break kind of ate into Kory's question time, but I hope that you'll take an opportunity this afternoon to seek him out and ask him any questions.
Thanks.
Thank you.